I will tell you a story that will bring a laugh to one eye and a tear to the other, and a fire of righteous anger to your heart. Make yourselves comfortable. The curtain is rising. Galina Adolfovna never entered a room. She marched into it, like an army into a conquered city. Her bearing, her thunderous voice that tolerated no objections, her gaze capable of burning a hole through an enameled cot, everything about her declared that you were in the presence not merely of a woman, but of a natural disaster in an apron. The epicenter of this disaster, the meaning and alpha of her existence, was her only son, adored to the point of trembling knees, Pavlusha. Pavlusha, by the way, had just turned 32, was a senior engineer at the Red Proletarian factory, and possessed a mustache as timid as his character. I, Vera, his lawful wife for 5 years now, occupied a place in my mother-in-law's value system, somewhere between a pesky moth in a wardrobe and a draft from an open window. Galina Adolfovna did not consider me an equal to her brilliant offspring. No, I was merely an unfortunate misunderstanding, a temporary error of nature which she, Galina Adolfovna, was called upon to correct. Her day began not with coffee, but with an inspection of our modest family nest. At 8 a.m, on the dot, an imperious ring would sound at the door. Pavlusha, already dressed for work, would cringe like a schoolboy who hadn't learned his lesson. I, clenching my teeth, would go to open it. "Right," she would begin without preamble, striding into the kitchen and running a finger along the countertop. "Dust! Vera, my dear, how could you? Pavlusha breathes this dust. He's had weak lungs since childhood. Are you trying to drive my boy into an early grave?" She would peer into the pot of borscht that had been cooking since 6 a.m. She would sniff it like a bloodhound, then taste it with the tip of a spoon. Her face would contort into such a tragic grimace, as if I had slipped arsenic into her bowl. "The beets aren't sautéed," she would pronounce her verdict. "The meat is tough. And where, I ask you, are the beans? Pavlusha loves borscht with beans. I cooked it with beans for him his whole life. And you, selfish, you only think of yourself." Pavlusha would shuffle awkwardly in the background and mumble, "Mama, please stop. The borscht is delicious." But his thin little voice would be drowned out by his mother's thunderous roar. But the culinary terror was just the beginning. The main event was the bride shows. Once a month, or even more often, Galina Adolfovna would bring another candidate for the role of Pavlusha's ideal wife to our home. It was a whole menagerie. There was Zinechka, an accountant from the meatpacking plant, a damsel with a powerful torso and a dowry in the form of a finished sideboard. She spent the entire evening explaining how to properly pickle cabbage and save on matches. There was an amateur poetess, Isolda, a languid maiden with coal-rimmed eyes, who read her talentless verses about birch tree sorrow, which made my jaw ache. There was even a colonel's daughter, Claudia, a grenadier of a girl, who immediately challenged Pavlusha to an arm wrestling match and, to his shame, won. Each time after another bride left, Galina Adolfovna would summarize. "You see, Vera, what kind of women there are, domestic, soulful, healthy. Not like some who only know how to spend money on dresses and ruin borscht." I remained silent. I accumulated a rage within me that could have boiled the Volga River. I looked at my soft-spined, mother-dominated husband, and I felt sorry for him. But the pity was mixed with irritation. One night, after another visit from my mother-in-law with the chief accountant's niece from Tambov, a golden girl sews her own clothes and plays the accordion. I lay awake staring at the ceiling. Tears choked me. How much more could I endure? And then, like a flash of lightning, an idea was born in my head. Daring, insane, risky, but brilliant in its simplicity. I laughed quietly into my pillow. The war was entering a new, decisive phase, and I, Vera, quiet and unassuming, was preparing to become its marshal. The next morning, when Galina Adolfovna, as was her custom, arrived for her inspection, I met her not with pursed lips, but with a wide, radiant smile. My mother-in-law even recoiled in surprise. "Hello, Galina Adolfovna. How glad I am to see you," I sang, handing her slippers. She eyed me suspiciously, as if expecting a trick. "What's the matter with you? Are you ill?" she boomed.
No, of course not. I was just thinking you were absolutely right, I said, looking her in the eye with the most sincere expression I could muster. I am not worthy of your Pavel. I am a bad housewife, a worthless wife. You spend so much effort finding a suitable match for him, and I am only getting in your way. My mother-in-law's jaw slowly dropped. She clearly had not expected such a turn of events. Well, I wouldn't say worthless, she stammered, confused. But there is, of course, potential for growth. Exactly. That's why I've decided to help you. Together, we will find the perfect wife for Pavlusha. After all, I know his habits, his character better than anyone. Together, we are a force. We will find him a woman who will make him happy for the rest of his days, and I will quietly step aside. I will go to my mother in Saratov. Pavlusha's happiness is the most important thing to me. I finished my speech with a tremor in my voice and even squeezed out a single tear. Galina Adolfovna froze like a statue. In her eyes, shock, disbelief, and delight mingled. The field marshal had just been offered unconditional surrender and an alliance. It was too good to be true. "Are you serious?" she breathed. "Absolutely," I answered firmly. "We'll start today. I have compiled a list of qualities for the ideal daughter-in-law. Point 1, impeccable health, confirmed by medical certificates. Point 2, a culinary education no less than a technical college. Point 3, a complete absence of bad habits and friends. Point 4, from that day on, Galina Adolfovna's life turned into a casting call, which I directed. I became her right hand, her advisor, her most ardent ally. Together, we reviewed profiles, went to accidental meetings in parks and theaters. I was merciless. "No, Galina Adolfovna, this one won't do," I would say, rejecting another of my mother-in-law's protégés. "Look, her nail polish is chipped. That indicates slovenliness. And this one, she laughs too loudly. A sign of hysteria. Pavlusha needs a calm, balanced woman." My mother-in-law, blinded by my enthusiasm, listened to me with her mouth agape. I subtly raised the bar to such dizzying heights that no real woman could possibly meet them. And then, after a month of grueling searching, when Galina Adolfovna was already beginning to despair, I delivered the main blow. "I think I found her," I announced in a mysterious whisper. "Isolda Ginrikovna, a dietitian, the daughter of a medical professor, a candidate for Master of Sports in chess, doesn't drink, doesn't smoke, goes to bed at 10, wakes up at 6, cooks exclusively by steaming, believes that the most important things in a family are discipline and routine." Where did you find her?" my mother-in-law whispered, a sacred fire igniting in her eyes. "She's
A distant relative of a friend of mine from the Theater Institute, I answered evasively. She's not an actress, of course. She just moves in intellectual circles. Isolda Ginrikovna was my masterpiece, a tall, bony lady with a heavy chin and the gaze of a drill. She spoke in clipped phrases, as if giving orders. At her first meeting with Galina Adolfovna, she didn't smile, but merely looked her up and down critically and declared, "You are overweight and have shortness of breath. You must change your diet immediately." Galina Adolfovna was ecstatic. She had found her ideal. She had found a second version of herself, only younger, stricter, and with a medical degree. She immediately invited Isolda Ginrikovna to dinner to introduce her to Pavlusha. As for me, having modestly retreated to the kitchen so as not to interfere with the young couple's happiness, I could barely contain my devilish laughter. The mousetrap had snapped shut. With the arrival of Isolda Genrikovna, life in the house turned into a branch of a strict regime sanatorium. The first thing the perfect daughter-in-law did was conduct a full audit of the refrigerator. Fried potatoes, pickles, sausage, and butter were thrown into the trash with contempt. Their place was taken by broccoli, celery, and fat-free cottage cheese. The health of the nation begins with healthy food, Isolda clipped, looking at Pavlusha's long face. Breakfast now consisted of oatmeal on water without salt or sugar. Lunch was steamed chicken breast with boiled carrots. Dinner was canceled as a harmful bourgeois habit. In its place, a glass of kefir was prescribed. Pavlusha, accustomed to my borscht and cutlets, walked around with hungry, mournful eyes. A couple of times, I secretly passed him a sandwich under the table, like passing a note in prison.
But it didn't stop at the diet. At 7 in the morning, Isolda Genrikovna organized mandatory morning exercises for the whole family by an open window, regardless of the weather. Galina Adolfovna, groaning and grunting, tried to do leg swings, which only earned a scornful smile from Isolda. "Your muscles are atrophied," she stated mercilessly. "At your age, this is a direct path to a heart attack. Squat deeper." The field marshal in an apron, for the first time in her life, found herself in the role of a new recruit being drilled on the parade ground by a despotic sergeant. Her authority was melting away before her eyes. Isolda criticized everything. How Galina Adolfovna washed the dishes. "You're leaving microbes. They need to be sterilized." How she watched television. "Electromagnetic radiation destroys brain cells." How loudly she spoke. "Raised tones are a sign of neurosis." The mother-in-law, who had spent her whole life ordering everyone around, was now under total control herself. She tried to object, but Isolda Genrikovna parried with ironclad medical terms that made Galina Adolfovna's head spin. My role was the most pleasant. I would visit Mamie with an innocent air, bring kefir, and sigh sympathetically. "Oh, Galina Adolfovna, how lucky you are," I would chirp. "Isolda is a real treasure, a true doctor, caring for your health, and how she loves Pavlusha, everything for him, all for his well-being." My mother-in-law would look at me with a haunted expression and nervously chew the corner of her handkerchief. The righteous anger in her soul had been replaced by a quiet panic. She had created a monster, and now that monster was about to devour her. The climax came 2 weeks later. Galina Adolfovna was secretly frying potatoes for herself in the kitchen when Isolda appeared in the doorway like a ghost. "Cholesterol, carcinogens, trans fats," she thundered. "You are deliberately undermining your health and setting a bad example for Pavel."
She ruthlessly snatched the frying pan from my mother-in-law's hands and dumped its contents into the trash. In that moment, Galina Adolfovna broke. Her eyes filled with tears, not tears of anger, but tears of helplessness and despair. That evening, the phone rang. I picked it up. "Vera, my dear Vera," my mother-in-law sobbed into the phone. "Save me. I'm begging you. Save us from this fury. I can't take it anymore. She's making us drink wheatgrass juice. Pavlusha has lost 5 kilograms and is hiding crusts of bread under his pillow. I was wrong. You are the best wife in the world. Your borscht is ambrosia. Just get rid of her. I'll agree to anything." I hung up the phone and smiled. It was time for the final act. The next day, I arrived at my mother-in-law's house like a savior. Galina Adolfovna and Pavlusha were sitting on the sofa, thin, pale, with equally miserable faces. Isolda, fortunately, was not at home. She had gone to a symposium on gastrointestinal problems. "Galina Adolfovna, I've thought of everything," I began in a serious tone. "Getting rid of Isolda won't be easy. She's a tenacious woman, but there is one way." My mother-in-law and husband stared at me with hope. "I will tell her that I'm pregnant," I announced solemnly, "that I'm expecting Pavel's child, that we've changed our minds about separating. No self-respecting woman will interfere with a family that is about to have a child. She will leave." "But you're not," Pavlusha began, but I stepped on his foot. "It's a little white lie in the name of saving the family," I cut in. Galina Adolfovna looked at me with the kind of adoration one reserves for an icon. "Vera, you're a genius! A grandson! I'm going to have a grandson!" That evening, when Isolda returned from her symposium, a carefully rehearsed performance awaited her. I sat next to Pavlusha, my head on his shoulder. Galina Adolfovna bustled around me with cushions. "Isolda Genrikovna, there's something we need to tell you," I began shyly. "Pavel and I have realized that we can't live without each other, and we're going to have a baby." Isolda measured my flat stomach with an icy gaze. "How far along? Ultrasound results? HCG analysis?" She clipped. But then something unexpected happened. My quiet, timid Pavlusha suddenly straightened up, put his arm around my shoulders, and said in a firm, unfamiliar voice, "We love each other, and we ask you to leave our home." Isolda Genrikovna looked at Pavel, then at me, then at the beaming Galina Adolfovna. For the first time, something resembling an emotion, utter astonishment, crossed her face. Then she shrugged. "As you wish. Hysterics and unplanned pregnancies are not part of my healthy lifestyle system." She turned and with a measured step walked out of the apartment. Forever. Silence hung in the room. Then Galina Adolfovna rushed to me and began to hug me. "Vera, my dear, thank you." That evening, I cooked a huge pot of borscht with beans, with sautéed beets, with rich sour cream. We sat at the table, and I watched my mother-in-law eat. She ate with such relish, with such happiness, as if it were not just food, but a symbol of freedom. But the story does not end here, because now I will reveal the main secret, which will leave you in shock. When Galina Adolfovna fell asleep, exhausted by the day's events and a hearty dinner, Pavel and I were left in the kitchen. He came up to me, hugged me, and laughed quietly. "You're something else, Verunya. What an actress! I almost believed you were pregnant myself." I smiled and kissed him. "And you? We love each other. We ask you to leave our home." A regular Othello. Where did you learn to do that? And then my husband, my quiet, browbeaten Pavlusha, winked at me. All for the cause, my love. Isolda Genrikovna was not a relative of my friend. Her name was Margarita Stepanovna, and she was a leading actress at our regional drama theater whom I had paid a handsome fee to play the role of the perfect daughter-in-law. But even that is not the most important thing. The most shocking thing was that Pavlusha had been in on it with me from the very beginning. His shyness, his indecisiveness, his constant, "Mama, please stop." It was all part of our grand plan. He was just as tired of his mother's oppression as I was. But he understood that open rebellion would only lead to scandals and a heart attack. And so the two of us, during quiet evenings, developed this multi-step operation. He brilliantly played the role of a mama's boy, allowing his mother to reach her breaking point, so that her fall would be all the more devastating. Since then, Galina Adolfovna has been as good as gold. She no longer comes over without calling, doesn't inspect the pots, and looks at me with a mixture of fear and respect. She never found out the truth, firmly believing that she herself had nearly destroyed her son's family and was saved by her daughter-in-law's wisdom. Sometimes she asks timidly, "So, when can we expect a grandchild?" And I smile and reply, "All in good time, Galina Adolfovna, all in good time." The war is over. We won, not with force, but with cunning. And now peace reigns in our home and the smell of proper borscht. Stories are born from emotions. If this story made you feel something, please share your thoughts. Every comment from you is a spark of inspiration for new stories about struggle, strength, and the hope that never fades even in the harshest reality. If you liked the story, subscribe to the channel, and you will hear even more exciting stories.